When Ethan Calder came home 2 days early, he expected silence, ocean air, and his wife's perfect Malibu mansion waiting under soft evening lights. Instead, he found the garage door half open. Inside, between paint cans and golf clubs, his black adoptive mother lay curled on a thin mattress beside a cold dinner tray. The woman who had raised him was wearing a maid's gray uniform. Her medication sat on the floor in a plastic bag, and when Ethan whispered, "Mom," she opened her eyes and begged him not to tell Claire he had found her there. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. To understand why she was afraid, Ethan had to go back to the year he chose distance over presence. The private jet had landed nearly 48 hours ahead of schedule. Ethan had not told anyone, not Claire, not the staff, not even Naomi. After 3 exhausting weeks in Singapore negotiating the largest acquisition in his company's history, he wanted one quiet surprise: a night at home, a glass of wine with his wife, a conversation with the woman who had stood beside him long before he became a billionaire. The Malibu mansion looked exactly as he remembered when the driver dropped him at the gate. Perfect, bright, immaculate. Nothing about it suggested that anything was wrong. Then he noticed the garage. The side door was slightly open. A thin strip of yellow light spilled onto the driveway. At first he assumed a staff member had forgotten to shut it. Then he heard a cough, a weak one, the kind that came from someone exhausted. He walked toward the sound. The smell hit him first: dust, cleaning chemicals, old cardboard. The garage was supposed to store luxury cars and sporting equipment. Instead, it looked like someone had been living there. A folding chair, a small electric kettle, a stack of neatly folded blankets. Then Ethan saw the mattress and Naomi. For a moment, his mind refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. Naomi Brooks had once worked double shifts as a nurse. She had guided him through college. Years later, when he was already an adult trying to escape the instability of foster care records and temporary placements, she had become his legal family through adult guardianship paperwork. She had never asked for anything in return. Now she looked smaller than he had ever seen her, older, fragile. Her gray uniform was wrinkled. The name tag clipped to her chest simply read household support. Ethan felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Mom." Naomi's eyes opened slowly. For one brief second, relief appeared on her face. Then fear replaced it, real fear, the kind no one could fake. "Ethan," she whispered. She struggled to sit up. He immediately knelt beside her. "What happened?" Naomi shook her head. "Please." Her voice trembled. "Don't tell Claire you found me here." The words made no sense. Ethan stared at her. "Why would I hide this from Claire?" Naomi looked toward the house, toward the glowing windows upstairs, toward the sound of distant laughter. Only then did Ethan realize people were gathered inside. A dinner party. He could hear glasses clinking, polite applause. Claire was entertaining guests. "She said the donors were important," Naomi murmured. "She didn't want me in the house tonight." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Donors?" Naomi nodded. "She said I make people uncomfortable." For several seconds he could not speak. The woman who had built his foundation alongside him, the woman whose name appeared on the earliest paperwork of the Calder Foundation, the woman he publicly called his mother at every major event, hidden in a garage because she made wealthy guests uncomfortable. A wave of guilt crashed into him. When had he last spent a full week at home? 3 months ago? 4? He sent money. He paid every bill. He assumed that was enough. Now he wasn't so sure. "Why are you wearing that uniform?" Naomi lowered her eyes. "It's easier." "Easier for who?" She did not answer. That silence frightened him more than anything else. Then she slowly reached for his hand. Her fingers felt cold. "I signed something, Ethan." "What do you mean?" "I don't know exactly what it was." A tear slipped down her cheek. Claire said it would help with medical appointments and household matters. Ethan felt every muscle in his body tense. "What kind of paperwork?" "I'm not sure." Naomi swallowed hard. "I think I gave her too much power." The laughter from upstairs echoed through the ceiling. A perfect evening continued above them. Meanwhile, the woman who had sacrificed everything for him was sleeping beside lawn equipment. Ethan stood. For the first time that night, anger pushed through the shock. His eyes moved across the garage, the mattress, the medication bag, the uniform. Then something caught his attention. Against the far wall stood a tall metal storage cabinet. Unlike everything else in the room, it was locked. A white label had been carefully attached to the front. Ethan walked closer, his heartbeat quickened. Printed in black letters were 3 simple words: Naomi Medical Records. Ethan stood motionless in front of the metal cabinet. For a moment, the sounds from the mansion seemed impossibly far away. Laughter drifted through the walls. Glasses clinked. Someone upstairs was probably complimenting Claire on another flawless charity event. Meanwhile, Naomi's medical records were locked inside a storage cabinet in a garage. His hands curled into fists. "Do you have the key?" he asked quietly. Naomi looked down. "No, Claire has it." Hesitation. Then Naomi nodded. The answer hit harder than Ethan expected. Medical records were private, sensitive, personal. There was no reason for Claire to lock them away from Naomi herself, unless she didn't want Naomi seeing what was inside. Ethan turned back toward her. "How long have you been sleeping here?" Naomi forced a smile that broke his heart. "A few months." "A few months?" Her eyes lowered again. The silence told him the truth. Longer, much longer. He looked around the garage once more, the small electric kettle, the folding chair, the worn blanket folded with careful precision. This wasn't temporary. This was a life, a hidden one, and somehow he had never seen it. A sharp wave of guilt rose inside him. Over the last year, he had spent more time in airports than at home. Whenever Naomi called, he answered quickly. Whenever she needed something, he paid for it. Whenever Claire assured him everything was fine, he believed her. He had mistaken financial support for presence, and Naomi had paid the price. "I should have known," he said. Naomi immediately shook her head. "No, Mom, no, Ethan." Her voice was soft but firm, the same voice that had guided him through some of the hardest years of his life. "You work hard, that's not an excuse." She looked away. Neither of them said anything for several seconds, because they both knew it wasn't. The silence was interrupted by footsteps above them. Several sets, guests moving through the house. A burst of laughter followed. Naomi visibly tensed. Ethan noticed immediately. Fear. Not discomfort, fear. His billionaire mother, because that was exactly what she was in his eyes, should not have reacted that way to footsteps in her own home. "Did Claire tell you to stay down here tonight?" Naomi hesitated. "She said the donors wouldn't understand." "Understand what? Me?" The answer made his stomach twist. He had spent years publicly talking about Naomi during interviews. Every major magazine profile mentioned her. Every foundation speech mentioned her. Every award acceptance speech included her name. Yet somehow Claire had convinced Naomi that wealthy strangers mattered more than her dignity. Ethan sat beside her on the edge of the mattress. "Look at me." Naomi slowly raised her eyes. "You belong in that house." Tears appeared instantly. She blinked them away, but Ethan had already seen them. For the first time that night, he realized something even worse than the garage itself. Naomi wasn't angry. She wasn't demanding justice. She wasn't asking him to fix anything. She had started believing she deserved this, and that realization terrified him. Because humiliation became truly dangerous when it turned into acceptance. A sudden vibration broke the silence. Ethan glanced at his phone. Claire, calling. He stared at the screen, then rejected the call. Almost immediately, another message arrived. "Where are you? The dinner is going beautifully. You should see the board members tonight." A second message followed. "When are you landing?" Ethan stared at the words. She had no idea he was already home. No idea he was sitting beside Naomi. No idea he had seen the garage. For now, he preferred it that way. He slipped the phone back into his pocket. "We're not talking to her yet." Naomi looked concerned. "Ethan, not yet." He stood and approached the cabinet again. The lock was simple. Not a high security system, just enough to keep someone out. His eyes moved across the shelves nearby. Cleaning supplies, toolboxes, storage bins. Then something else caught his attention. A small cardboard box tucked behind a stack of paint cans, half hidden, almost forgotten. He pulled it free. Naomi immediately looked nervous. "What is that?" "I don't know." The box contained papers. Nothing organized. Just loose documents folded and refolded many times. Medical appointment cards, prescription receipts, insurance statements, and several unopened envelopes, all addressed to Ethan. His chest tightened. The oldest envelope was dated 8 months earlier. Another 6 months. Another 3. He looked at Naomi. "You wrote these?" Her face paled. She nodded slowly. "I didn't want to bother you." The words felt like a knife. He carefully opened the most recent envelope. The paper inside was wrinkled from being folded too many times. "Ethan, I know you're busy. Please don't worry. I'm fine. Claire says you're under a lot of pressure right now. I don't want to create problems, but sometimes I think I've become a burden here. Maybe it would be easier if I returned to Chicago. I miss talking to you, love always." Momathan swallowed hard. The date was 4 months old. He had never seen it. He opened another and another. Each one was gentle, careful, never accusing, never complaining, just increasingly lonely. One letter stopped him cold. "Ethan, Claire says it would be better if I stopped attending foundation events. She says people are uncomfortable when I tell stories about the hospital. Maybe she's right. Maybe I don't fit into this world anymore." The words blurred slightly. He lowered the paper. Naomi was staring at the floor, ashamed, as if she'd done something wrong. "You mailed these?" She nodded. "Most of them." "Most?" Her hands trembled. "I stopped after a while." "Why?" No answer. The question lingered between them. Finally Naomi spoke. "'Cause they kept coming back." The garage suddenly felt colder. Ethan looked at the stack again. Returned mail, unopened envelopes. Months of silence, months of isolation. Someone had intercepted them. Someone had made sure they never reached him. The realization landed heavily. This wasn't simple cruelty. It was control, deliberate, systematic, calculated. Then Naomi slowly reached into the pocket of her gray uniform. "There's something else." She handed him a folded piece of paper. Unlike the letters, this one looked recently handled. The edges were worn. Ethan unfolded it carefully. At first glance, it looked like a photocopied form. Then his eyes found the words, authorization, medical decision assistance, temporary representation. His heartbeat quickened. Near the bottom was Naomi's signature. Above it was Claire's name, and several sections had been highlighted. Ethan read the document twice, then a third time. Something felt wrong, very wrong, because one paragraph appeared to grant Claire access to far more than appointment scheduling. It referenced financial communication, health records, residential recommendations, possible future care decisions, the kind of language that should have been explained by an attorney, not presented casually at a kitchen table. "Mom?" Ethan asked quietly. "Who witnessed this signing?" Naomi looked confused. "Witnessed? Was anyone else there?" Her answer came immediately. "No." Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. He lowered the paper and looked once more toward the locked cabinet, then back at the authorization form in his hands. For the first time that night, he wasn't thinking about humiliation. He wasn't thinking about the garage. He wasn't even thinking about Claire. He was thinking about what might already be hidden inside those medical records, and whether his wife had been preparing something far more dangerous than either of them had realized. Ethan did not sleep that night. Long after the dinner upstairs ended, long after the last luxury car disappeared through the gates, he remained in his home office staring at the authorization form Naomi had signed. The language bothered him, not because it was complicated, because it was too broad. The document wasn't simply about helping schedule appointments. Several clauses granted access to private medical communication, financial correspondence related to care, and recommendations regarding future living arrangements. The kind of language most people skimmed, the kind of language that could quietly change someone's life. At 3 a.m, Ethan scanned every page and saved encrypted copies on a private server only he controlled. Then he photographed the unopened letters, the returned envelopes, the dates, everything. By dawn, he had made a decision. He would not confront Claire, not yet. He needed facts. For the first time since discovering Naomi in the garage, he was thinking like the businessman who had built a billion-dollar company. Emotion could wait. Evidence could not. The next morning, he found Naomi already awake. She was sitting at the small folding table in the garage drinking tea. The sight nearly broke him. She had lived in the mansion for years, yet she still behaved like someone afraid to occupy space. "I made breakfast," she said softly. Ethan glanced at the tray beside her. Toast, tea, nothing else. His chest tightened. "Mom," she looked up. "You're eating with me inside today." Fear immediately crossed her face. "Claire won't like that. I don't care." The words came out harder than he intended. Naomi looked startled. Then something unexpected happened. A faint smile appeared. Tiny, almost invisible, but real. It was the first sign Ethan had seen that she had not completely given up. They entered through the kitchen together. Claire was already there, elegant as always. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect smile, at least for the first 2 seconds. Then she saw Ethan and Naomi. At the same table, the smile vanished, only for an instant. Then it returned, polished, controlled, practiced. Ethan. She crossed the room quickly and kissed his cheek. "You should have told me you landed. I wanted to surprise you." His voice remained calm. Claire's eyes briefly moved toward Naomi, then away. The movement lasted less than a second. But Ethan noticed. Now he noticed everything. "How was Singapore?" Claire asked. "Successful." "Good." She poured herself coffee. No mention of the garage, no mention of the uniform, no mention of why Naomi had spent the night beside lawn equipment. The silence itself felt calculated. Naomi quietly ate her toast. Claire ignored her completely, as if she weren't sitting 3 feet away, as if she were part of the furniture. By the time breakfast ended, Ethan understood something important. Claire wasn't cruel only when angry, she was cruel when calm. The exclusion was deliberate, habitual, and far more dangerous than shouting. An hour later, Claire left for a charity planning meeting. The moment her car disappeared beyond the gates, Ethan returned to the garage. The locked cabinet waited exactly where he had left it. This time he examined it carefully. The lock wasn't sophisticated, a local hardware store model. Within minutes, the head of security discreetly provided the access code registered for emergency use. When the cabinet door finally opened, Ethan felt his pulse quicken. Several thick folders sat inside, each labeled with Naomi's name. At first, the contents looked ordinary: doctor appointments, prescription records, insurance correspondence. Then he noticed handwritten notes attached to many pages, sticky notes, all written by Claire. Increasing forgetfulness, repeated confusion, possible memory decline, unsafe judgment. Ethan read the comments twice. None of them matched the woman he knew. Most were attached to completely normal medical visits. One note referenced Naomi forgetting where she left a pair of reading glasses. Another described her becoming emotionally unstable after asking to attend a foundation dinner. A third suggested she struggled to understand financial discussions. That one made Ethan laugh out loud. Naomi had balanced hospital budgets before Claire had graduated college. The laugh quickly faded. This wasn't random. Someone was building a narrative, piece by piece, month after month, a paper trail, and every document pointed toward the same conclusion: decline, incapacity, dependence. Exactly the kind of story someone might use if they hoped to gain legal authority over an elderly adult. Then Ethan found another folder. This one was different. The label simply read correspondence. Inside were copies of emails, printed, organized chronologically. His stomach dropped. Many had been sent by former colleagues from Naomi's nursing career, retirement friends, hospital administrators, people inviting her to reunions, community events, volunteer projects. The replies were shocking: declined due to cognitive concerns, unable to participate, experiencing memory-related difficulties, written in Naomi's name, but Naomi had never written them. Ethan knew immediately. The tone was wrong, the wording was wrong, everything was wrong. Someone had systematically isolated her, not through force, through reputation. The realization chilled him, because isolation made people easier to control, and control seemed to be the real objective. A noise behind him broke his concentration. He turned. A woman stood near the garage entrance. Mid-40s, dark hair, housekeeper uniform. She looked startled to find him there. "I'm sorry, Mr. Calder." Ethan recognized her. Marisol, one of the household employees. "It's okay," he said. She hesitated, then glanced toward the cabinet. A strange expression crossed her face: recognition, concern, maybe guilt. "You've seen these files before?" Ethan asked. Marisol immediately lowered her eyes. The reaction answered him before she spoke. "I shouldn't say anything." "Why not?" She swallowed. For several seconds she appeared to be debating something internally. Then she looked toward the house, checking, listening, making sure Claire wasn't nearby. Mrs. Claire said Mrs. Naomi was becoming confused. "Do you believe that?" Marisol's answer came instantly: "No." The word hung in the air. Simple, certain, honest. Ethan felt his pulse quicken again. "Then why didn't anyone tell me?" Pain appeared on her face. The answer took several moments, because everyone who disagreed with her eventually left. The garage suddenly felt very quiet. Marisol stared at the floor. "I almost left too." "What stopped you?" She looked toward the mansion, then back toward Ethan, and what she said next changed everything. Mrs. Naomi. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Tears appeared in her eyes. Last year, Mrs. Clare accused me of breaking a crystal vase during a fundraiser. Marisol's voice trembled. I didn't break it. Ethan listened carefully. Mrs. Naomi knew I didn't. A pause. Then the truth. She told Mrs. Clare she had done it herself. The words hit him like a punch. Marisol continued. She paid for the vase from her own savings. Another pause. She saved my job. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Even now, even while being humiliated, Naomi had been protecting someone else. Marisol reached into her pocket. Her hand shook slightly. I think you should have this. She handed him a folded note, old, creased, clearly hidden for a long time. Ethan unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was unmistakably Claire's. At first, the message seemed harmless. Then he reached the final sentence. His blood turned cold. If Naomi keeps interfering, Sunny Acres may become the only option. Below the sentence was a handwritten date, 8 months ago, and suddenly Ethan understood. Claire hadn't just been preparing paperwork. She hadn't just been isolating Naomi. She had been planning something for a very long time. Something with a name, something with a destination. And for the first time, Ethan realized Sunny Acres wasn't simply a nursing facility. It was the next step in a plan already in motion. Ethan stared at the note from Marisol for a long time after she left the garage. Sunny Acres, 8 months. The date mattered, because it proved this wasn't a recent argument or a temporary lapse in judgment. Claire had been planning something long before Ethan stepped off that plane from Singapore. He folded the note carefully and slipped it into a folder with the letters, photographs, and copies of the medical documents. Every piece of evidence went into the same place. Not because he wanted revenge, because he wanted the truth, and the truth needed protection. By noon he had made 2 phone calls. The first was to James Holloway, the attorney who had handled most of Ethan's personal legal matters for nearly a decade. The second was to a geriatric specialist recommended by the Calder Foundation's Elder Care Division. Neither call was dramatic, neither produced instant answers. That was exactly why Ethan trusted them. Real investigations moved slowly. Real protection required documentation. Late that afternoon, Dr. Rachel Myers arrived at the mansion. Claire was still away at meetings. Naomi almost refused to participate. I don't want to cause problems, she said quietly. Ethan sat across from her at the kitchen table. For a moment he simply looked at her. The woman who had spent months minimizing her own suffering because she was afraid of becoming an inconvenience. Mom, he said softly, you're not causing the problem. Something shifted behind her eyes. Not relief, not yet, but perhaps the first small crack in the guilt Claire had built around her. An hour later, Ethan waited outside while Dr. Myers completed the evaluation. The process took time, questions, memory assessments, medical history, physical examination, conversations, nothing rushed, nothing predetermined. As the minutes passed, Ethan found himself pacing the backyard overlooking the ocean. The view was worth millions. The house was worth millions, yet he could not stop thinking about a mattress in a garage. The contrast made him feel sick. His phone buzzed. Claire, again. He ignored it. Another message arrived. Dinner tonight? Need to discuss Naomi. The words immediately caught his attention. Need to discuss Naomi. Not ask how Naomi was doing. Not check on her health. Discuss Naomi, like a problem, like a project, like an item on an agenda. For the first time in years, Ethan did not answer. When Dr. Myers finally emerged from the guest suite, her expression was professional but serious. Naomi remained inside, resting. Ethan already knew part of the answer before the doctor spoke. She's cognitively sound. The tension inside his chest loosened slightly. Dr. Myers continued. There are normal age-related issues, minor forgetfulness. Nothing unusual. Ethan nodded. What about dementia? No evidence of it. The answer came immediately. Certain, unequivocal. But then the doctor's expression hardened. However, there are other concerns. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. What kind of concerns? Dr. Myers glanced toward the hallway before lowering her voice. Mr. Calder, has your mother been living under significant stress? The question felt almost absurd. Stress, such a small word for what he had discovered. Why? The doctor folded her hands. Because several indicators suggest prolonged emotional pressure. She carefully explained her observations: sleep disruption, weight loss, anxiety responses, hypervigilance. the tendency to apologize excessively, even for things beyond her control. Ethan listened quietly. Each point felt painfully familiar. He had already seen them. He just hadn't recognized them, or perhaps he hadn't wanted to. "Can you document all of this?" he asked. "Yes." "And the cognitive findings?" "Of course." The doctor paused, then added something unexpected. "You may also want to consult Adult Protective Services." Ethan looked up. Dr. Myers chose her words carefully. "I'm not making legal conclusions. That's not my role." A brief pause. "But when an older adult begins losing autonomy because of coercion, isolation, or manipulation, outside evaluation can sometimes help establish an objective record." Coercion. The word lingered, because it described the situation better than abuse. Abuse sounded explosive, visible, obvious. What Claire had done was quieter, more sophisticated, and perhaps more dangerous. That evening, Ethan met James Holloway in his office downtown. The attorney spent nearly 2 hours reviewing every document: the letters, the authorization form, the medical notes, the returned mail, the handwritten comments attached to Naomi's records. When he finally looked up, his expression was grim. "This doesn't automatically prove wrongdoing," Ethan nodded. He expected that answer. "But," James tapped the authorization form, "but it raises serious questions." He explained that California law involved specific requirements depending on what powers someone was attempting to exercise. A signature alone did not automatically grant unlimited authority. Context mattered, intent mattered, documentation mattered. Which was precisely why Claire's behavior concerned him. Someone appears to be building a narrative. Ethan leaned forward. "The same thing I thought." James nodded. "If I wanted to argue incapacity, I'd want supporting records." His finger moved across the stack. Medical concerns, another page. Behavioral concerns, another. Isolation, another. Documentation suggesting declining judgment. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Not one piece alone, all of them together. A story, a carefully constructed story, the kind that might eventually support guardianship proceedings. The word landed heavily. Guardianship. Legal authority over another adult's personal decisions, medical choices, living arrangements, sometimes finances. Ethan felt cold, because Naomi had trusted Claire, and trust could be weaponized. James closed the folder. "For now, do nothing impulsive." "I'm not planning to." "Good." The attorney studied him carefully, because if someone is preparing a guardianship petition, timing matters. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "It means whoever started this process may already be speaking with professionals." The room fell silent. The possibility had not occurred to Ethan. "Not fully," James continued. "If she's already gathering statements or consultations, confronting her too early could simply push everything underground." The advice made sense. He hated it, but it made sense. That night, Ethan returned home after dark. The mansion looked peaceful, perfect, exactly the image Claire worked so hard to maintain. Inside, he found Naomi sitting in the library reading an old nursing journal. For the first time since his return, she wasn't in the garage. She wasn't wearing the gray uniform. She was wrapped in a simple blue cardigan. Small victories. But victories nonetheless. He sat beside her. Neither spoke immediately. The silence felt gentler now. Then Naomi quietly closed her book. "Ethan?" "Yes?" She hesitated, long enough for him to know she was debating whether to continue. Finally she did. "Claire had visitors while you were away." His attention sharpened instantly. "What kind of visitors?" "I don't know. Lawyers? I never met them." Her hands tightened around the book. "But I heard conversations." Ethan waited. They kept using one word, a pause, then she whispered it. Guardianship. Every muscle in Ethan's body went rigid, because until now, guardianship had only been a theory, a possibility, an interpretation of the evidence. But hearing the word directly from Naomi changed everything, and before Ethan could ask another question, Naomi slowly reached into the pages of the journal and pulled out a folded business card, one she had hidden for months. He took it, turned it over, and saw the name of a law firm specializing in elder conservatorship and guardianship cases. On the back, someone had handwritten a date, and next to it were 5 words that made his blood run cold. Initial consultation approved by Claire. Ethan stared at the business card long after Naomi went upstairs. The law firm's name meant nothing to him. The specialty beneath it meant everything: elder conservatorship and guardianship services. The date on the back matched the timeline perfectly. 8 months ago. The same period when Naomi's letters stopped reaching him. The same period when she had been moved from the guest suite. The same period when Claire began documenting so-called signs of decline. What had once looked like isolated incidents was becoming a pattern, a deliberate one. The next morning, Ethan did something he should have done months ago. He checked the security archives. Not the short-term footage normally reviewed by household staff. The full archive. Every camera, every month, every angle. His home office remained locked for nearly 6 hours. By the end of the second hour, he already wished he had never opened the files. The first videos were subtle. Claire reminding Naomi not to join guests for dinner. Claire asking Naomi to use the side entrance because it would be less confusing. Claire gently correcting stories Naomi told about her nursing career. Each interaction appeared harmless in isolation, almost caring, almost reasonable, but together they revealed something else. A systematic shrinking of Naomi's world. Less access, less visibility, less dignity. Then the footage became harder to watch. One recording showed Naomi arriving in the main dining room dressed for a foundation fundraiser, nothing extravagant. A simple navy dress, a silver necklace Ethan had bought her years earlier. She looked proud, happy, like she belonged there. Claire intercepted her before she reached the guests. The audio wasn't perfect, but Ethan could still hear enough. "This event isn't really your scene." Naomi smiled politely. "I helped build the foundation." Claire's expression changed instantly. Not anger. Something colder, embarrassment. As if Naomi herself were an inconvenience. "You don't understand how these people think." Several minutes later, Naomi quietly returned upstairs alone. The footage ended. Ethan sat back in his chair. His stomach churned, because he finally understood something. Claire had never simply wanted Naomi out of the house. She wanted her erased. The next clip was worse. A winter evening. Heavy rain outside. The security camera covering the rear hallway captured Naomi carrying blankets, slowly, carefully, toward the garage. No argument, no confrontation, no force, just compliance, as if the decision had already been made. Ethan checked the date, 7 months ago. His jaw tightened. That was the week he had been in Zurich finalizing a merger. He remembered calling home. Remembered Claire telling him everyone was doing great. Remembered believing her. The guilt hit harder than before. Not because he had caused this, because he had been absent while it happened. Money had solved every business problem in his life, but it had not protected the one person who mattered most. A notification interrupted his thoughts. James Holloway, the attorney. Ethan answered immediately. "I've reviewed everything. What do you think?" A brief silence. "Enough concerns that I recommend moving forward carefully." That wasn't the answer Ethan wanted, but it was the answer he trusted. James continued. "The medical evaluation helps. The letters help. The isolation concerns me." Another pause, but none of it proves intent. Intent, the most difficult thing to establish. The difference between misunderstanding and manipulation, between bad judgment and deliberate misconduct. What would, James exhaled, communication? Ethan frowned. What kind? Emails, messages, notes, anything showing that someone was actively trying to portray Naomi as incompetent. The call ended a few minutes later, and Ethan immediately knew where to look. Not Claire's phone, not yet. That would create legal complications he wasn't prepared to risk, but there were other places. Shared computers, foundation correspondence, archived email backups, household management software, the systems Claire used every day. By late afternoon, he was sitting in the foundation office attached to the property. Most of the records were routine, budgets, donations, scheduling, nothing unusual. Then he found something strange, a folder labeled Community Outreach. The name sounded harmless, almost boring, which was probably why no one would ever think to open it. Inside were dozens of files, most were ordinary, until Ethan discovered a subfolder hidden beneath administrative records. His pulse quickened. The contents were password protected, a simple password, one Claire used repeatedly. Within seconds the folder opened, and everything changed. Not because there was one shocking document, because there were dozens. Meeting notes, draft letters, private observations, behavior reports, all focused on Naomi. Every conversation she forgot, every appointment she missed, every disagreement she had with Claire. Each incident framed as evidence. Building, accumulating, documenting. The narrative James had warned him about. Ethan continued reading, then one file made him stop. Coastal Wife Circle. The name meant nothing until he opened it. A collection of screenshots appeared, private group messages, affluent women, charity board members, social acquaintances. Several names Ethan recognized immediately. The conversations began innocently. Fundraisers, social events, vacations. Then Naomi appeared. At first as a joke, then as a problem, then as something much darker. How do you handle older relatives who refuse to know their place? One message read, another followed. Some people mistake kindness for equality. Several women responded. Most comments were uncomfortable. A few were openly cruel. But Claire's messages stood apart. They weren't emotional. They were strategic. I'm documenting everything. When the time comes, the transition will be much easier. Ethan felt cold. He continued scrolling. The dates stretched back nearly a year. One message stopped him completely. If I can establish incapacity, the foundation issue solves itself. He reread it twice, then a third. Foundation issue. Not family issue, not care issue, foundation issue. For the first time, Ethan saw a possible motive. Not just embarrassment, not just prejudice, control. His mind immediately returned to something Naomi had once mentioned years earlier. A trust agreement. A governance role. Something connected to the foundation's original structure. At the time, he hadn't paid much attention. Now he wished he had. He kept reading. And then he found the message that made his blood run cold. It had been sent 4 months ago. Claire wrote, "The biggest obstacle isn't Ethan, it's Naomi. Once she's declared incapable, everything else becomes simple." Ethan slowly closed the laptop. The room suddenly felt smaller because the story was changing. This was no longer only about humiliation, or cruelty, or even guardianship. There was another objective hidden underneath all of it. Something connected to the foundation, something important enough for Claire to spend nearly a year building a case against Naomi. His phone vibrated. A text message from Naomi. Simple, short, unexpected. "Ethan, I remembered something today. Something I hid. I think you need to see it." His pulse quickened instantly. He called her. No answer. A second later another message arrived. Not in the house. The old nursing textbook. The blue one. Top shelf. Before Ethan could type a response, a final message appeared. And this one made him stand up so quickly that his chair nearly tipped over. It wasn't just a document. It's the copy Claire never knew I kept. The moment Ethan read Naomi's last message, he left the foundation office. He drove home faster than he should have. Not recklessly. Just with the urgency of a man realizing that the person he had underestimated most wasn't Claire. It was Naomi. For days, Ethan had viewed her as the victim, a woman cornered, manipulated, silenced. But every new piece of evidence told a different story. Naomi had been watching, remembering, saving things, preparing quietly in ways no one had noticed, including Claire. The mansion was unusually quiet when he arrived. Claire was hosting another planning session off-site. Most of the staff had finished for the evening. Naomi was sitting in the library reading when he entered. She looked up and immediately understood why he had come. "You found the messages." It wasn't a question. Ethan nodded. "You kept something." Naomi slowly closed the book in her lap. For a moment she looked older than usual. Tired. Not physically, emotionally, as if carrying a secret for too long had become heavy. "Follow me." She stood carefully and walked toward a small sitting room near the back of the house. The room was rarely used. Old books, family photographs, a fireplace. The kind of place people forgot existed. Naomi stopped before a tall bookshelf. Her hand moved to a faded blue nursing textbook, the same one mentioned in her message. She pulled it down, then carefully opened the back cover. A folded envelope slid out, yellowed with age, protected inside clear plastic. Ethan took it. "What is this?" Naomi didn't answer immediately. Instead, she sat down, as though she knew what came next would matter. "A lot." Finally, she spoke. "About 11 months ago, Claire asked me to sign several foundation documents." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. "What kind of documents?" She said they were administrative updates. Naomi's eyes remained fixed on the envelope. I believed her. Of course she had. Naomi trusted people. That was one of the reasons Ethan loved her, and one of the reasons Claire had been able to exploit her. "I signed most of them." A pause. "Except one." Ethan looked down at the envelope. His grip tightened. "Why?" For the first time, Naomi smiled slightly, a faint smile. The kind that appeared when an experienced nurse recognized something dangerous before everyone else did. "Because I read it." The answer surprised him. Naomi continued. I spent 40 years signing medical paperwork. Another pause. I know when someone hopes you won't read the fine print. Ethan carefully opened the envelope. Several pages appeared inside, copies, not originals, photocopied legal documents. At first glance they looked routine. Then he saw the title, Calder Foundation Governance Amendment. His heartbeat accelerated. The foundation again. Every path seemed to lead back to it. He sat beside Naomi and began reading. Halfway through the first page, he understood why she had hidden it. The amendment proposed significant changes. Changes to voting authority, changes to trustee oversight, changes to governance structure. Nothing illegal, nothing obviously alarming, until the final section. There it was. One clause, buried deep within legal language. If a trustee became medically incapable of serving, authority would automatically transfer to a designated successor. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He kept reading. Then he found the successor's name, Claire Calder. The room suddenly felt smaller, much smaller. For several seconds neither spoke. Finally Ethan looked up. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question came out softer than intended. Naomi stared into the fireplace. Because the answer hurt. "I tried." His chest tightened. Of course she had. The letters, the intercepted calls, the isolation. Every warning sign he had missed. Naomi continued quietly. "Then I started wondering if maybe I was wrong." The words broke something inside him. Because they sounded familiar. Not from Naomi. From every person who had been manipulated long enough to question their own instincts. Ethan looked back at the document. The timing aligned perfectly. Claire's campaign against Naomi had begun shortly after the amendment failed. Not before, after. That wasn't coincidence. That was motive, and motive changed everything. Vibrations interrupted the silence. Ethan glanced at his phone. "James Holloway," he answered immediately. "I was about to call you," Ethan said. "So was I." The attorney sounded unusually serious. "What happened?" A brief pause. Then James spoke. "I found something connected to the foundation." Ethan's eyes moved toward the amendment in his hands. "What kind of something?" "The board dinner next week." Ethan frowned. "What about it?" "Claire intends to present a recommendation." The words landed heavily. "What recommendation?" Another pause. Longer this time. Then James answered, "A transition of care proposal for Naomi." The room fell silent. Naomi slowly lifted her eyes. Even from several feet away she could tell the conversation had changed. James continued, "I obtained a preliminary agenda." Ethan stood, already pacing. "Claire is presenting concerns about Naomi's capacity." His jaw tightened. Of course she was. The guardianship narrative, the medical notes, the isolation, the documentation, everything had been leading somewhere, and now he knew where. The board dinner, a public setting, respected donors, foundation leadership, witnesses, legitimacy, the perfect stage. James kept talking. "If she succeeds, she won't gain legal authority immediately." A brief pause. "But she could influence the board." Another pause. "She could influence future trust decisions." Ethan looked at the amendment again. Everything suddenly connected. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to see the shape of the plan. The foundation wasn't secondary, it was central. Claire hadn't merely wanted Naomi out of the mansion, she wanted her removed from influence, removed from credibility, removed from any position capable of stopping her. The realization settled over him like cold water, because it meant the coming confrontation wasn't about family alone, it was about power. And power made people dangerous. After the call ended, Ethan sat down beside Naomi. For several moments neither spoke, then she quietly placed her hand over his. The same gesture she always used when someone needed reassurance. Even now, even after everything, she was comforting him. Not the other way around. "I don't want a fight," she said softly. Ethan looked at her. "I know, I never wanted one." The sadness in her voice felt heavier than anger ever could. Then she added something that made him stop breathing for a second. "There may be one more thing." His attention sharpened instantly. "What?" Naomi hesitated, long enough to reveal how serious it was. "When Claire brought those lawyers to the house," she stopped, thinking, remembering, "I heard a name." "What name?" Naomi slowly looked toward the window, toward the darkening ocean beyond the glass, and when she finally answered, her voice was barely above a whisper. "The name wasn't mine." Ethan felt a chill crawl through him. "What are you talking about?" Naomi swallowed, then delivered the sentence that changed everything once again. "They weren't only discussing removing me from the foundation." A pause. a long one. I think they were discussing someone else whose name was never supposed to appear in the Calder family records. And before Ethan could ask another question, the front door opened. Claire had come home early, and she wasn't alone. The front door closed with a quiet click. Ethan and Naomi exchanged a glance. Neither moved. For several seconds, only the distant sound of voices echoed through the mansion. Then footsteps approached. Not first. 2. Claire was speaking to someone. A man. The voice was unfamiliar, professional, measured. Ethan stood immediately. The envelope containing the foundation amendment disappeared into his jacket pocket. Naomi quietly slid the nursing textbook back onto the shelf. Years of surviving difficult situations had taught her one thing: never reveal what your opponent doesn't know you have. The footsteps grew closer. Then Claire appeared in the doorway. Her smile arrived first. Perfect, polished, dangerous. The moment she saw Ethan and Naomi together, a flicker of surprise crossed her face. Only a flicker, then it vanished. Ethan. She stepped into the room. You came home earlier than expected. The statement sounded casual, almost affectionate, but Ethan heard something else beneath it. Calculation. She was assessing the situation, adjusting, looking for weaknesses. The man beside her entered a second later, mid-60s, expensive suit, leather portfolio, the kind of professional who spent years learning how to appear harmless. Claire turned toward him. Oh, where are my manners? Her smile widened. This is Richard Keene. The name hit Ethan immediately. Not because he knew the man personally, because he recognized it. The business card. The guardianship firm. The same firm Naomi had hidden. Claire's smile remained steady. Richard has been helping the foundation with governance planning. A lie, or at least not the entire truth. Ethan could see it, Naomi could too. Richard extended his hand. Mr. Calder, pleasure to finally meet you. Ethan shook it. The attorney's grip remained calm, confident, but something changed in his expression when he noticed Naomi standing nearby. A subtle shift, recognition and concern, very brief, but real. The attorney knew exactly who she was, which meant this wasn't the first conversation involving her, not even close. The tension in the room thickened. Claire seemed determined to ignore it. We were discussing preparations for next week's board dinner. Ethan held her gaze. Were you? Claire nodded. Important decisions need to be made. Important decisions. The phrase lingered, because everyone in the room understood what she really meant, except perhaps Richard, or perhaps he understood better than anyone. The attorney cleared his throat. Actually, Mrs. Calder, I should probably leave. Claire looked irritated. You just arrived. Another time, his answer came too quickly, too carefully. Richard's eyes moved briefly toward Naomi, then back to Ethan. If you ever need clarification regarding any governance documents, Mr. Calder, please feel free to contact me directly. The sentence sounded harmless, but Ethan heard the emphasis. Directly, not through Claire. A warning disguised as courtesy. Minutes later, Richard was gone. Claire watched through the front window until his car disappeared. Then she turned around, and the performance ended. The smile vanished. What exactly is happening here? The question wasn't directed at Ethan, it was directed at Naomi, as though Naomi had somehow caused the evening. Ethan stepped forward immediately. No, Claire blinked. No, you don't talk to her that way anymore. The silence that followed felt almost physical. For the first time since his return, Ethan had drawn a line, a clear one. Claire stared at him, trying to determine how much he knew, how much he had seen, how much damage had already been done. Naomi quietly stepped backward. Not out of fear, out of habit. The movement broke Ethan's heart, because no one should instinctively retreat inside their own home, especially not after everything they had sacrificed. Claire crossed her arms. Have you been discussing me? Ethan answered honestly. Yes, something cold entered her eyes. I see. The mask slipped again. Not entirely, just enough, long enough, then it returned. Professional, controlled. We should talk privately. No, the answer came immediately. Claire looked stunned. What do you mean no? I mean Naomi stays. The silence returned. He had never challenged her this way before, never refused her request in front of someone else, and Claire knew it. The power dynamic was changing. She could feel it. That frightened her, which made Ethan even more cautious. Fear often made people careless. Claire took a slow breath, then changed tactics. Fine, her voice softened. Concern replaced irritation. The transformation would have impressed anyone who didn't know her. Then let's talk openly. She turned toward Naomi. Because I'm worried about you. Naomi didn't respond. Claire continued. You've been confused lately. Ethan almost laughed. The same script again, only now he knew where it led. Claire kept talking. You've forgotten appointments, no response. You've misunderstood conversations, still nothing. Then came the final line. The one Ethan had expected. I think we need to start discussing professional care options. The room went completely still. Professional care, Sunny Acres, guardianship, incapacity. The entire plan compressed into 3 innocent-sounding words. Naomi lowered her eyes, not because she believed Claire, because she was exhausted by months of defending her own sanity. Ethan stepped forward. Dr. Myers disagrees. Claire froze. For the first time all evening, genuine alarm appeared. Just for a second, then she recovered. Who? A geriatric specialist? The silence deepened. Ethan watched her carefully. Every reaction mattered now. She completed an evaluation. Claire said nothing. Naomi is cognitively healthy, still nothing. But the color had left her face, only slightly. Enough, a crack, the first real crack. Claire forced a smile. I'm sure one evaluation doesn't tell the whole story. The sentence sounded reasonable, until Ethan noticed something. Naomi had gone pale, not from fear, recognition, as if she had heard that exact phrase before. After Claire finally left the room, Ethan waited. He knew Naomi wanted to say something. The signs were obvious. The hesitation, the nervous glance toward the hallway, the tightening of her hands. Finally she spoke. Richard. Ethan turned. What about him? Naomi swallowed. I remember now. Her voice shook slightly. He wasn't just at the house once. A pause, then another. He came 3 times. Ethan felt his pulse accelerate. When? Months ago. She closed her eyes, trying to remember. I heard him and Claire arguing. That surprised him. Arguing? Naomi nodded. He kept saying there wasn't enough. Enough what? Evidence. The word landed hard. Because it confirmed everything. Not suspicion. Not theory. Evidence. Someone had been trying to build a case, a legal one. Naomi looked toward the dark hallway, then back at Ethan. And what she said next changed the entire shape of the story. There was another person. Ethan frowned. The name you heard? She nodded. For several seconds she seemed unsure whether to continue. Then she did. He wasn't part of the foundation. Who was he? I don't know. A pause. But Richard told Claire something. Ethan leaned forward. What? Naomi's voice dropped almost to a whisper. He said if that file ever surfaced, everything would collapse. The room fell silent. Ethan stared at her. A file? Naomi nodded, then slowly pointed toward the far end of the library, toward an old photograph hanging beside the fireplace, a photograph Ethan had passed thousands of times without thinking. That's where I found it. His heart skipped. What file? Naomi's eyes filled with uncertainty. I never opened it. The answer made no sense. Then how do you know? Another pause, longer this time, painful, because the memory was incomplete. Finally she whispered the words that left Ethan frozen in place. Because before Claire took it away, I saw the label, a breath, then another, and then the name, the Calder Family Trust Beneficiary File. The words hung in the air, the Calder Family Trust Beneficiary File. Ethan stared at Naomi. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The foundation amendment had already exposed Claire's motive. The guardianship plan had revealed her strategy. But this was something different. A beneficiary file meant money, inheritance, legacy, and most importantly, a person. Someone connected to the Calder Family Trust, someone important enough to have an entire file hidden. Are you sure? Ethan finally asked. Naomi nodded slowly. I saw the label clearly. She looked toward the old photograph above the fireplace. It happened about 4 months ago. Ethan remained silent. Naomi continued. Claire thought I was asleep. She and Richard were in the study. They were arguing. About the file? I believe so. Naomi closed her eyes briefly. I heard Richard tell her they couldn't simply make it disappear. The sentence sent a chill through Ethan. Not create, not change, disappear, meaning the file already existed, meaning someone wanted it hidden. The question was why. That night Ethan barely slept. He sat alone in his office reviewing years of trust documents. The Calder Family Trust had existed long before he became wealthy. It originated with his late grandfather. Over decades, the trust evolved into a complex structure supporting charitable projects, educational grants, and eventually the foundation. Everything appeared normal, until around midnight. A small notation caught his attention. One line, buried deep inside an annual trust report from 6 years earlier. Special beneficiary review completed. No names, no details, nothing else. Just the notation, yet it appeared only once. Never before, never after. Ethan immediately forwarded the document to James. The attorney called less than 20 minutes later. I saw it. What does it mean? I don't know yet. James sounded troubled. Trusts sometimes contain confidential beneficiaries. Family members? Sometimes. The answer wasn't reassuring. Can we access the file? A pause. Legally, yes. Another pause. Assuming it still exists. That answer worried Ethan even more. The next morning brought another surprise. Adult Protective Services arrived at the mansion. Claire hadn't expected it. The expression on her face when the investigator introduced herself was impossible to hide. For the first time, Ethan saw genuine panic, not fear of embarrassment, fear of losing control. The investigator, Sandra Bishop, spent nearly 3 hours at the property. She interviewed Naomi privately, then Ethan, then Claire. She inspected the garage, photographed the mattress, documented medication storage conditions, reviewed room access, took notes about meals, heating, mobility, everything. Claire remained perfectly composed throughout the process, but Ethan noticed something. Every answer sounded rehearsed, every explanation polished, almost too polished. Sandra noticed it too. When the interview ended, she asked Ethan to walk her outside. The ocean breeze carried away most of their conversation from the house. What do you think? Ethan asked. Sandra chose her words carefully. Neglect cases aren't always obvious, I understand. But older adults rarely end up sleeping in garages because everything is healthy. The answer was enough. Not a conclusion, not an accusation, just enough. As Sandra prepared to leave, she handed Ethan a card. Your mother deserves to be treated as a person. Her eyes moved briefly toward the mansion, not as an inconvenience. Then she drove away. Claire watched from the front window, and she looked furious. By evening, the tension inside the house felt almost visible. No shouting, no scenes, just silence, cold silence, the kind that forms before something breaks. Around 7, Ethan received another call, this time from James. We found Richard. Ethan sat upright. What did he say? He wouldn't discuss client matters, of course, but he confirmed something indirectly. James lowered his voice. The beneficiary file existed. Ethan felt his pulse jump. What happened to it? He refused to answer. Not good enough, not even close, yet the confirmation mattered. The file was real. Naomi hadn't imagined it. Someone had hidden it deliberately, and Claire knew about it. That same evening, Ethan made a decision. For months he had reacted, now he would act. He entered the study shortly after dinner. Claire was working at her laptop, reviewing foundation materials, preparing for the board dinner, exactly as planned. She looked up. What is it? Ethan closed the door behind him, then sat across from her. For several seconds he simply watched her. The woman he had married, the woman he thought he knew, the woman who now seemed like a stranger. Finally he spoke. I know about the trust file. Claire froze. Only for a fraction of a second. But it happened, and Ethan saw it. What file? The denial came too fast, too practiced. He leaned back. The beneficiary file. Silence. A dangerous silence. Then Claire smiled. A small smile. Not warm, not affectionate, almost amused. I think you're chasing ghosts. The answer confirmed everything. Because innocent people ask questions, they don't dismiss. Ethan stood. I gave you every opportunity to be honest. Claire slowly closed her laptop. And I gave you every opportunity to stay focused on reality. There it was. The threat hidden beneath the words. The old strategy. Make him doubt himself. Make him question the evidence. But it no longer worked. Not anymore. He turned toward the door. Then stopped. One more thing. Claire waited. The board dinner is still happening. Her eyes narrowed. Of course it is. But it won't go the way you planned. For the first time in weeks, uncertainty appeared on her face. Small, brief, but real. Ethan left the room without another word. Later that night, Naomi knocked softly on his office door. She held something in her hand, an old photograph. The frame was cracked, the image faded. I found this behind the fireplace years ago. Ethan accepted it carefully. The photo showed 3 adults standing outside a building. The picture looked decades old. 1 man, 2 women. The quality was poor. Yet one detail immediately stood out. The man was unmistakably a Calder. The resemblance was obvious. The same eyes, the same jawline, the same expression. But it wasn't Ethan's father, and it wasn't his grandfather. What is this? He whispered. Naomi shook her head. I don't know. He turned the photograph over. There was handwriting on the back, old handwriting, almost impossible to read, but not completely. Ethan moved closer to the lamp, slowly, carefully. The faded ink became visible, a date, a location, and a single sentence. The moment he read it, his entire understanding of the trust changed, because written beneath the photograph were 6 words, in case they ever find him. The board dinner ended in silence, not because people had nothing to say, because the truth had spoken first. The trust records, the forged documents, Naomi's preserved letters, the independent medical evaluation, and the adult protective services findings had created a picture that no speech from Claire could erase. The investigation that followed took months. Real life moved slower than outrage. The foundation suspended Claire immediately. The board voted unanimously to remove her from all leadership responsibilities pending legal review. The forged signatures triggered separate civil proceedings. Several documents were referred for further examination. Nothing happened overnight, but the direction was clear. Claire's control was gone. The divorce became final 8 months later. She left the Malibu mansion with the settlement outlined in the prenuptial agreement and the consequences of choices she had made herself. Some former friends disappeared quietly. Others publicly distanced themselves. No dramatic collapse, no spectacular punishment, just something far more real, the gradual loss of influence, trust, and credibility, the things she had valued most. As for the hidden trust file, the mystery eventually unraveled. The photograph had led James and the trust attorneys to archived records stored with an old estate administration company. The beneficiary had been a forgotten adult relative from a previous generation of the Calder family, a man whose existence had been intentionally buried decades earlier because he embarrassed wealthy family members who cared more about reputation than blood. The trust had been created to ensure he received support. When he died years before Ethan ever became involved with the family, the file should have remained protected but preserved. Instead, Claire had viewed it as a threat. If she could erase one inconvenient person from the family narrative, she believed she could erase another, Naomi. That realization hurt Ethan more than he expected, because it revealed the deeper truth. Claire had never only been fighting Naomi. She had been fighting the idea that someone's worth could exist outside status, wealth, and appearances. 3 months after the board dinner, Naomi moved back into the main house, but not permanently. The decision surprised everyone except Naomi. One evening, she stood on a bluff overlooking the Pacific Ocean with Ethan beside her. A small cottage sat a short distance away. Simple, bright, filled with sunlight. Nothing like the mansion. Nothing like the garage. "This is where I want to live," Naomi said. Ethan studied her face. "You don't want the house?" Naomi smiled gently. "The house was always yours." She looked toward the ocean. "This feels like mine." There was no anger in her voice, no bitterness, only certainty. For the first time in a long time, she was making a choice for herself, not adapting, not enduring, choosing, and Ethan respected that. The cottage was placed in her name alone. No conditions, no oversight, no hidden paperwork, just dignity, the thing she should never have lost. A few weeks later, Ethan asked her a question he had been carrying for months. They were sitting on the cottage porch watching the sunset. The air smelled like salt and jasmine. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Naomi didn't answer immediately. She folded her hands together and stared toward the horizon. "I tried." The words landed softly, more painful than any accusation. Ethan lowered his eyes, because she was right. The letters, the phone calls, the small signs, all the things he had missed. "I know." Silence settled between them, then Naomi continued. "The garage wasn't the worst part." Ethan looked up. "What was?" For the first time, her voice trembled, not from fear, from honesty. "I thought you might never notice." The sentence cut deeper than anything else, not because it accused him, because it revealed how alone she had felt. All those months, sleeping beside boxes and tools, watching people walk through the mansion above her, wondering whether the person she loved most had simply moved on. Ethan felt tears sting his eyes, not dramatic tears, the quiet kind, the kind that come when excuses finally stop working. "I'm sorry." The words sounded inadequate, because they were. He couldn't give her back the lost months, couldn't erase the humiliation, couldn't undo the loneliness, but he could tell the truth. "I thought sending money meant I was taking care of you." Naomi nodded. Many people believed that. It's not the same, no, it isn't. The conversation didn't magically heal everything. Trust rarely returned that way. But it became a beginning, and beginnings mattered. 6 months later, the garage behind the mansion looked completely different. The mattress was gone. The storage shelves were gone. Even the old concrete floor had been replaced. In its place stood the Calder Advocacy Center, a small non-profit office offering legal referrals, elder care resources, and support services for vulnerable adults facing neglect, financial exploitation, or coercive control. Nothing flashy, nothing designed for publicity, just practical help. The kind Naomi respected. She became its first advisory volunteer. Several afternoons each week she sat with families, social workers, and older adults who felt invisible. She listened, guided, encouraged. Sometimes all she offered was understanding, yet it mattered, because people who had been ignored often needed to be heard before anything else. One afternoon Ethan stopped by unexpectedly. Through the office window he watched Naomi speaking with an elderly woman whose family had pushed her aside after she became dependent on them. Naomi wasn't giving a speech. She wasn't trying to save anyone. She was simply sitting beside her, making sure she wasn't alone, the same thing she had needed herself. Ethan stood there for a long time. Then he smiled. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't. Some wounds remained, some memories always would. But the story no longer belonged to the garage or the humiliation or Claire. It belonged to something stronger, the decision to protect rather than ignore, to show up rather than assume, to see someone's worth before it was too late. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Naomi locked the office door and joined Ethan outside. Together they looked back at the building, a place created from one of the darkest chapters of their lives, a place now helping others find their way out of the same darkness. And for the first time in a very long while, both of them felt at peace. If this story touched you, share your thoughts below. And if it reminded you to check on someone who once protected you, stay with Family Echoes for more stories about truth, justice, and the families we must never forget.